Welcome back to DFC Books. Today we're embarking on a really deep dive. We're getting into the world of Edgar Allan Poe.
That meticulously crafted but deeply unsettling universe he created.
Exactly. We're using the essential collection of his tales and poems as our guide here. You know, the stuff that basically defines American Gothicism, kicks off the modern detective story.
And really plumbs the depths of the human psyche. It's foundational stuff.
It really is. And our mission today is, well, it's pretty critical. We want to go beyond just summarizing. We're aiming to distill the core knowledge.
Yeah, zeroing in on those essential characters, the key events, the themes that tie it all together.
So you walk away really understanding Poe's genius, not just knowing the plots.
Right. And to really appreciate kind of unique darkness in Poe's fiction, you kind of need to understand the backdrop, his life, particularly the financial desperation.
It really shadowed him, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. His career timeline is just marked by hardship. That relationship with his foster father, John Allan, it was wealthy, yeah, but fraught, and it ultimately just collapsed.
Sounds like something out of one of his own stories, doesn't it? The rich benefactor dies, cuts him off, leaves the young writer totally adrift.
It really is like that. A tragedy of expectation, then abandonment. When John Allan died, March 27th, 1834, well, he got his revenge from beyond the grave.
How so?
Wrote Poe completely out of his will. A large estate, and Poe got nothing. Zip.
Wow. So that left him
Financially ruined, desperate. And you can argue that desperation, that constant instability, it permeates the claustrophobia, the paranoia you find in so much of his work, especially the early stuff.
But that pressure, that need for money, it did push him professionally.
It definitely did. By 1835, he'd moved to Richmond, took over as editor of the Southern Literary Messenger. That's where he started publishing some key works.
Like Berenice Morella.
Exactly. The ones that really started building his reputation, both as this, terrifying fiction writer, but also as a sharp literary critic. Sometimes pretty vicious, actually.
But the stability,
Yeah.
it never really lasted for him.
Never. I mean, right up to the end, 1849, he's on a lecture tour trying to scrape together funds for a new magazine he wanted to start. Just this final kind of frantic attempt to secure his future.
For a future that just never happened.
No. His end is as mysterious as anything he wrote. October 3rd, 1849, he's found in Baltimore. Semi-conscious, delirious apparently, wearing clothes that weren't even his.
That's bizarre.
Totally bizarre. He died just 4 days later, October 7th, and the official cause of death. Still a mystery. Nobody knows for sure. So that whole context, the desperation, the tragedy, that weird sudden end, it's kind of the perfect setup for the darkness in his writing.
And that writing, it fits squarely into that literary mode we call Gothicism. When we talk Poe, we think decaying mansions, internal gloom. But where did that whole Gothic thing even come from?
Right, so Gothicism, its roots are really in mid-18th century Britain. It grew out of a mix of things. Its fascination with the medieval past, architectural styles coming back, but also, and this is key, a growing sort of psychological curiosity. People were getting interested in non-rational states of mind, subjective experience. It was kind of pushing back against the Enlightenment's focus on pure reason.
But the critics back then, they weren't exactly fans, were they?
Oh, definitely not. The establishment critics, the ones who like the, rational neoclassic stuff, they pretty much dismissed it, called it vulgar Germanism.
Germanism, even though it was British.
Yeah, the term was just dismissive shorthand. It implied it was overly emotional, superstitious, lacked control, basically bad taste. It didn't matter where the stories actually originated. They just used Germanism to mean stuff we don't like.
And Poe took that gloomy foundation and really ran with it. What strikes me from the source material is the point that the horrors in Poe often feel more frightening because they happen without any supernatural aid. It's all internal.
That's the essential insight, absolutely. Poe is a master of the psychological roots of horror. And we need to distinguish here. There's horror, which is, external, sensory, physical pain, disgusting things, gore.
Right.
And then there's terror. That's internal. Emotional upheaval, anxiety, hysteria, the fear of what might happen. Poe uses the physical horror, the smell of a corpse, confinement, blood, to trigger that deeper, paralyzing terror inside the characters. The real monster is often the obsessed mind, or the guilty one.
Okay, let's try and unpack that with a big example. The narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym. Poe's only novel, right? And it blends realism, polar exploration was big then, with just profound psychological horror.
Pym is such a strange beast in literature. It definitely tapped into that 19th century love for boys' adventure stories, which were hugely popular.
Yeah.
But Poe completely subverts it. He layers these realistic details, nautical life descriptions with this coded psychological terror. So it ends up being an adventure, yes, but also this horrific account of mutiny and survival, and even subtly a kind of dark comedy, but how little we actually know.
Even the structure plays games.
Yeah.
Right, pretending it's a true story.
Exactly. That preface, claiming it's all factual. Right away, it messes with your perception of what's real in the story.
So let's talk characters. Pym himself, who is he?
Well, Arthur Gordon, Pym, he's basically on this perilous journey, not just physically, but spiritually, psychologically. He's moving towards maturity, maybe.
Hmm.
Sources point at his name. Pym might be an anagram for imp,
Imp, like a mischievous spirit.
sort of suggesting this driven, maybe slightly reckless energy pushing him into danger. Initially, he's with his friend Augustus Barnard. Augustus is more your standard adventure story kid, naughty, but not really malicious. His early adventures set that initial kind of playful tone.
But that playful tone doesn't last. That first trip on the boat, Ariel, it's almost a disaster. That's some serious foreshadowing.
Oh, absolutely. That near wreck on the Ariel. They're drunk, they almost capsize, pure luck saves them. It's a dark warning. And the name Ariel itself is loaded.
How so?
The source material suggests it might be an allusion to the boat wreck that killed the poet Shelley. So Poe's signaling right away this adventure. It's one where poetic ideals, spiritual ambitions, they're likely to end in violence and destruction.
Okay, then the real horror kicks in when he stows away on the whaling ship, the Grampus. What happens there?
The Grampus voyage is where humanity just crumbles. Poe unleashes what you could call the physique of the horrible. You get revolting sickness, a really violent mutiny, shipwreck, starvation,
Leading to?
cannibalism.
Yeah.
And Pym himself experiences live burial when he's hiding down in the ship's hold. That's a theme Poe comes back to again and again. This is where Pym learns that difference we talked about, the external horror, the stench, the pain, the gore, versus the internal terror, the mental collapse, the fear, the hysteria of it all.
It sounds completely relentless, and his main ally through this is Dirk Peters, right? He's an interesting figure.
Very. Dirk Peters is all about contrast. He's this rugged survivor, a hybrid figure, son of an Indian woman from the Upsarokas tribe. He becomes Pym's protector. Some analysis suggests his name merges sexuality and spirituality, marking him as this primal force needed for survival when civilization breaks down. He's pure instinct, which Pym, the educated guy, lacks.
They eventually sail way, way south and encounter the Selaeans.
Yeah, the Solonian culture, it's depicted as rejecting femininity. There's symbolism there, like the destruction of the ship Jane Guy, which has this strong feminine association. They take a native guide, Nunu, hostage.
And what happens to Nunu?
Later, as the story plunges into its totally bizarre final act, Nunu dies. Some read this as symbolic, like the established, rule-bound self can't merge with the deep unknown or the feminine principle. It represents a failure to achieve that necessary psychological growth.
And the novel famously ends with that image. Pym and Peters drawn towards this giant, white, shrouded figure near the South Pole. What is that?
That ending is the ultimate triumph of the unknown over rational exploration. The figure is huge, terrifying, awe-inspiring. Pym is pulled towards it. It symbolizes perhaps this inevitable merging of the masculine analytical side with the mysterious, maybe feminine, unknown depths of the universe. It's Pym's final, maybe cataclysmic step, realizing that true identity has to embrace mystery, even if it means total annihilation.
Speaking of voyages into terrifying unknowns, Emuscript Found in a Bottle hits similar notes, right? Nautical chaos, but the narrator tries so hard to stay rational.
He's the ultimate rationalist, isn't he? Starts off saying he's a skeptic, committed to the severe precincts of truth, resists superstition. And to prove it, he gives this detailed list of the ship's cargo.
Right, the cotton wool, oil, coir, jaggery, ghee, opium.
Exactly. He's meticulous, insisting on facts, even as disaster looms.
But facts don't help much against Poe's irrational forces, do they?
Not a bit. Hurricane hits. Only he and an old Swede survive. Then this gigantic black ship appears out of nowhere, sailing impossibly far south, driven by this unstoppable current, and the terror comes from knowing where they're headed.
Towards? What?
Towards some never-to-be-imparted secret whose attainment is destruction. The journey itself is the end, its existential doom.
And the crew of this ghost ship, they don't even see him.
That's the ultimate horror, isn't it? They're ancient, wrapped up in their own thoughts, just sailing past him. He's completely isolated, a ghost on a ghost ship heading for oblivion. His final act.
Manuscript in the bottle.
Yeah. documenting everything, a final desperate act of the rational mind trying to leave a record, trying to ensure this factual yet totally inexplicable account survives the collapse of reality itself.
Okay, let's pivot from the chaos of the sea to the structured architecture of the mind that refuses to collapse. We have to talk about C. Auguste Dupin, the first detective hero, basically.
Dupin is absolutely pivotal. In Poe's world, he represents the perfect mind. The narrator in Murders in the Rue Morgue calls it the bipart soul.
Bipart soul, what's that about?
It's this idea of the creative and the resolvent, the analytical side working together perfectly. When Dupin's analyzing, he's described as cold, abstract. He uses educated thought, not just the cunning the police rely on. He solves things they can't even begin to understand.
So let's start with The Murders in the Rue Morgue, the first modern detective story. The police are just baffled by how impossible the crime seems. What stumps them?
It's what Poe calls the outre character, the sheer weirdness of it all. First, the violence. Huge struggle, the daughter's body shoved up a chimney, head down.
Grim.
Incredibly grim. Second, the mother's horrific mutilation. And third, the conflicting witness accounts about the voices they heard.
Right, everyone heard two voices but disagreed on the language. French, English, Russian.
Exactly. A Spaniard, an Italian, a Frenchman. They all heard a gruff voice and a shrill one, but couldn't agree on the language. They were trying to fit it into human categories, and it just didn't work.
Because they were looking for a human killer. Dupin looked at the physical facts first. The locked room.
Precisely. He ignores the confusing testimony for a moment and focuses purely on how the killer got out. He finds what the police missed, a hidden spring latch on a window, with the securing nail broken in a very specific way to look intact unless you examined it extremely closely.
Okay, so escape was possible. Then he tackles the voices.
Then he goes back to the voices. And he realizes the issue isn't just a foreign accent. It's that the speech lacks coherence of syllabification.
Meaning?
Meaning it didn't have the structure, the patterns of any human language. It leads him, logically, terrifyingly, to the conclusion. The killer wasn't human, it was an orangutan.
An ape, escaped from a sailor.
Yes. And the motivation ties into mimicry. The sailor taught the ape to shave. The ape saw Madame L'Espanaye with her hair down, maybe thought it was imitating shaving with the razor.
Oh, wow.
But the old lady screamed, which enraged the ape, turning imitation into this horrifying, savage frenzy, that blend of almost human action and pure animal violence that's classic Poe.
Dupin shows off his analytical skills again in the purloined letter, but this time it's more about psychology, right? Analyzing his opponent, Minister D.
Yeah, this one's a masterclass in why educated thought beats mere cunning. Dupin totally dismisses the prefect's methods, tearing everything apart, checking hollow chair legs.
Oh, that pointless searching.
Pointless. Because the police assumed the minister would think like a common criminal and use complex hiding places. Dupin understands Minister D is different. He's both a mathematician, rigorous logic, and a poet. And courtier understands human psychology, disguise, how people think.
So the police looked for complex hiding, but D went simple.
Exactly. Dupin figures D would exploit their expectation of complexity. He'd hide the stolen letter, the compromising one, right out in the open.
Where does he find it?
Dupin visits the minister, scans the room, and spots it. It's just stuck carelessly in a cheap-looking card rack hanging by the fireplace. It's been deliberately soiled, crumpled, made to look unimportant, totally defying D's known methodical habits. Dupin's genius is reading the mind of his opponent, anticipating how that specific intellect would choose to hide something.
So if Dupin is the mind working perfectly, the bipart soul, Poe also shows us minds completely fracturing. Let's get into the haunt itself. William Wilson, for starters.
William Wilson is such a powerful exploration of guilt, of conscience made real. You've got the narrator, William Wilson, and he's constantly shadowed by his double, another William Wilson.
Looks just like him, acts like him.
Almost exactly, except the double has this weirdly husky sort of muted voice. And this double basically acts as the narrator's conscience, always showing up to stop him from descending further into, well, bad behavior. Turpitude, as Poe puts it.
And the story uses repetition a lot, right? The name, the schools, the settings.
Yes, the repetition, the claustrophobic settings, it all builds this intense psychological pressure. And the word will keeps appearing. It really highlights that central conflict. The narrator's will versus his conscience's will. The double exposes his cheating at cards at Oxford, stops it in Rome, Paris, Naples.
He's constantly interfering.
Relentlessly, until the narrator just snaps and forces a final confrontation.
And that's where the psychological horror lands.
Right, he kills the double. But as the double dies, the truth comes out maybe in the reflection of a mirror, maybe just realization. He sees he hasn't just killed his double, he's murdered the good part of himself. His integrated self is gone. And that husky voice, Poe implies it was muted because the narrator refused to listen to his conscience. Killing the double is spiritual suicide.
That theme of self-destruction, of guilt turning inwards, it screams the telltale heart. The narrator starts by telling us he's not mad, just nervous.
Yeah, it's such a classic, unreliable narrator opening. He insists he's sane and tries to prove it by detailing how carefully, how methodically he planned and executed the murder.
Driven by the eye.
The old man's pale blue, filmed over vulture eye. Not hatred for the man himself, who he says he loved, but this irrational obsession with the eye.
The level of detail in his planning is genuinely creepy.
It really is. He spends 7 nights sneaking into the room, taking an hour just to open the door enough to peek in with his lantern. He emphasizes how cautious he was, how foresightful. It's his proof of sanity, ironically demonstrating his madness. After the murder, he dismembers the body, hides it under the floorboards so perfectly, so cunningly, he thinks.
But it's his own mind that betrays him, not his work.
Exactly. Why detail all that meticulous care just to have him fall apart? Because the real horror is internal. The police show up, a neighbor heard a shriek. The narrator's calm, confident, even has him sit right over the hidden body.
Then he hears it.
Then he thinks he hears it. This low, dull, quick sound. The beating of the victim's heart, getting louder and louder and louder. It's purely in his head, a manifestation of his guilt, but it drives him mad with terror until he just shrieks and confesses, pointing to the floorboards. Calculation destroyed by conscience.
Okay, from internalized guilt, let's move to these really morbid obsessions. Premature burial, fatal fixations. Let's look at 2 early ones. Berenice and Morella.
Right, Berenice. Here we meet Aegeus. He's described as almost unreal, born and raised in a library, totally detached from the physical world.
Can't cope with reality.
Basically. And this detachment becomes this morbid focus on tiny, trivial things, which then latches onto the teeth of his cousin, Berenice. She's his fiancée, but she's suffering from some mysterious illness.
So instead of love, he gets obsessed with her teeth.
Exactly. His inability to connect with her as a person transforms her features into objects for his monomania. It drives her towards, seemingly, an early grave. But the ending is horribly ambiguous. Aegeus wakes from a trance, finds a box with dental tools and teeth.
Oh, God.
Did he pull them from her corpse? Or, even worse, given Poe's obsession with catalepsy, that temporary death-like state, did he violate her grave while she was still technically alive but unable to move? The ambiguity is terrifying. It suggests this fixation led to a truly grotesque act.
And Morella tackles identity after death head-on, using philosophy.
Yeah, Morella is all about her intellect. She teaches the narrator dense German philosophy Fichte, Schelling, ideas about identity, about the self continuing beyond the physical body. But the narrator finds her learning oppressive. He dreads it, actually longs for her death.
And she dies, but...
Promises she'll meet him again. Then a daughter is born, an exact physical copy of Morella, but without the disturbing intellect. He raises her, terrified.
Until the baptism.
Right, the daughter's 10. At the baptism, he has to give a name. He speaks the name Morella, and the child just collapses, dies. And this horrifying voice says, I am here. The mother's identity, her consciousness perhaps, has somehow resurrected itself in the child. It totally blows up the idea of a stable individual self.
That instability leads right into the pure physical terror of confinement in The Pit and the Pendulum. This one feels like pure endurance.
It's the ultimate story of living entombment, yeah. The narrator is a victim of the Spanish Inquisition in Toledo, and he goes through this systematic, methodical series of tortures designed to break him completely.
What are the stages?
First, the darkness, and nearly falling into that deep, circular pit hidden in the floor. The terror of sudden, unseen death. Second, he's strapped down, forced to watch that giant, razor-sharp pendulum swinging lower and lower.
Inch by inch.
Exactly. The psychological agony of watching death approach so slowly. He only escapes that by using the meat scraps they give him, rubbing them on his bindings to attract the rats.
Rats.
To chew through the surcingle of the strap holding him down. It's ingenious, desperate.
But the Inquisition isn't done right. Relief is always temporary with Poe.
Never done. The final horror is the walls. They start closing in, heated, glowing red-hot, physically shrinking the stays, forcing him inevitably towards that central pit. It's the terror of a shrinking world, forcing a choice between being crushed or falling into the abyss.
How does he survive?
Purely external luck. Just as he's about to fall, the French army storms Toledo. General LaSalle catches him, saved at the very last second. It emphasizes how powerless he ultimately was against the system.
And our last big tale of confinement and guilt, the Black Cat. This one links the narrator's downfall explicitly to alcohol, doesn't it?
Yes, intemperance, as he calls it. His whole personality changes because of drinking. He turns cruel. First, he cuts out the eye of his beloved black cat, Pluto. Then later, in what he calls a spirit of perverseness, he hangs the cat.
Just pure malice.
Yeah. Then a second cat appears. Looks identical to Pluto, except for a white patch on his chest. The second cat drives him even crazier, intensifying his guilt and paranoia until he snaps and tries to kill it with an axe, but kills his wife instead when she intervenes.
And like the Telltale Heart narrator, he thinks he can hide it perfectly.
He walls up her body in the cellar, behind freshly plastered bricks. So confident. But he makes one tiny, fatal mistake.
What is it?
He accidentally walled up the second cat, the living cat, the source of his torment, inside the wall with the corpse. So when the police come investigating his wife's disappearance, he's overly confident, bragging about how solid the cellar walls are, even taps the exact spot.
And the cat.
The terrified cat lets out this inhuman shriek from behind the wall, betrays the whole thing. The police tear it down, find the body, and the cat sitting on her head. His own mistake, born from his torment, undoes him.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly towards Poe's fables, his dark comedies, his tales of almost theatrical revenge. The Mask of the Red Death comes to mind first.
Such a potent allegory. Prince Prospero thinks he and his rich friends can just wall themselves off from reality. They hide in this castellated abbey while the Red Death, this plague characterized by blood, scarlet stains, quick death, ravages the land outside.
The abbey itself is symbolic, right? Those 7 colored rooms?
Absolutely. Laid out in a line, east to west, maybe blue, purple, green, orange, white, violet. Ending in the 7th room. Black velvet tapestries, but with blood-red window panes. And in that last room, a huge ebony clock.
That tolls every hour.
Yeah, and every time it tolls, the music stops, the dancing stops, everyone gets uneasy. It's this constant reminder of time passing, of mortality, even inside their supposed safe haven. Then night.
The uninvited guest arrives.
The masked figure, dressed like a corpse, dabbled in blood, perfectly embodying the Red Death itself. Prospero is furious, tries to confront it.
Which doesn't end well for him.
He chases the figure through the colored rooms, finally into the black and scarlet chamber. He raises his dagger, but just drops dead. The other revelers then grab the figure, only to find there's nothing inside the costume.
No tangible form.
Exactly. The Red Death isn't a person they can fight. It's an unstoppable force, an inevitability. Their walls, their wealth, their denial, utterly useless.
Now, for pure calculated revenge, you can't beat Montresor in the Cask of Amontillado.
Montresor might be the most chillingly effective Avenger Poe ever created. He operates under his family motto, Nemo me impuneless esset.
No one insults me with impunity.
Right. And for him, impunity is key. The revenge doesn't count unless he gets away with it completely, without any punishment falling back on him.
And he picks his victim, Fortunato, perfectly.
Exploits Fortunato's pride in being a wine expert. And the fact that it's carnival season, so Fortunato's already drunk and wearing a jester's costume, makes him vulnerable, foolish. Montresor lures him down into the family catacombs.
Under the guise of tasting some rare Amontillado sherry.
Exactly. Leads him deeper and deeper into these damp, niter-covered vaults past piles of bones. Then, when Fortunato's drunk and unsuspecting, Montresor chains him into a niche in the wall and just bricks him up, alive.
And the story tells us this happened 50 years ago.
Yeah, the final lines reveal Montresor is telling this story half a century later, meaning he absolutely succeeded. He punished Fortunato and faced no consequences. Chillingly perfect revenge.
And for a different kind of revenge, almost cathartic. Hop Frog.
Hop Frog is brilliant. It's dark, yeah, but there's a real sense of justice, however brutal. Hop Frog, the dwarf jester, moves with that interjectional gait, constantly mocked by the fat king.
Who has that constitutional swelling of the head. Great description.
Isn't it? Perfect image of pompous power. The king and his ministers bully Hop Frog and his friend Trippetta. The breaking point comes when the king forces Hop Frog, who's sensitive to alcohol, to drink wine on his birthday.
Which pushes him over the edge.
Fuels his rage and his plan. He suggests a costume for the king and his 7 ministers for a masquerade. Orangutans. He chains them together, covers them in tar and flax to look hairy.
Setting them up.
Completely. He gets them all chained together, hooks the chain to the chandelier chain, hoists them high up in the ballroom, and then takes a torch, a flambeau,
Oh, no.
and
No.
sets them all on fire, shouting, "This is my last jest," as they burn.
Ah.
Then he escapes through the roof with Trippetta. It's this incredibly violent theatrical destruction of the oppressors.
Wow. Okay, looking across these tales, certain things keep recurring. Animals mirroring human traits, the role of alcohol.
Definitely. Even in early tales like Metzengerstein, you see it. The young baron's wild behavior, his feud. It culminates in this merging of human and animal, with that tapestry horse seemingly coming alive to destroy him in a fire. It's like uncontrolled passion becoming a literal destructive beast.
And alcohol often seems linked to delusion or breakdown in the shorter, maybe stranger pieces.
Yeah, things like Shadow a Parable or Silence a Fable,
Yeah.
they're steeped in this atmosphere of maybe intoxication or gluttony. In Shadow, you have these mourners drinking red Chian wine, then they're terrorized by this disembodied shatter, the narrator's name, Ornos, Greek for wine.
So it's basically a wine bibber's tale, as Poe suggests, the drunkard's nightmare.
Pretty much signals that, yeah, using horror tropes to explore delirium or social excess.
But then Poe could just switch gears completely. From that drunken haze to pure cold logic, like in The Gold Bug, that one feels different.
It really does. The Gold Bug
Mhm.
is Poe showing off his analytical muscles. It's almost entirely about decryption, about problem solving. The plot hinges on finding and cracking that cipher.
And it starts with noticing something odd on the parchment, right?
Exactly. Legrand, the main character, realizes the drawing of the skull, the death's head, wasn't on the parchment when he first catched the beetle. It only appeared later, when the parchment got near the heat of the fire. Invisible ink.
That gives them the clue, but the real challenge is the cipher itself. That requires some serious brain power.
It's all about frequency analysis, which was a known cryptographic technique, but pretty novel to feature so centrally in fiction then. Legrand explains his whole process, how E is the most common letter in English.
Naoid.
Right. He sees the most frequent symbol in the cipher is the number 8. He hypothesizes 8 equals E. Then he tests it, looking for double 8s because words like meat or tree are common.
And once he cracks E,
The whole thing starts to unravel. He identifies other key letters, works out the words. It leads them to the instructions about shooting from the left eye of the death's head on the tree branch.
which leads them to Captain Kidd's buried treasure.
Exactly. Using the skull on the tree, the good glass, telescope, dropping the bullet. It's all this chain of logical steps. The precision is the point. It shows that same bipart soul, the analytical power, can solve intensely practical puzzles too.
Okay, let's round things out by touching on the poetry. Because the emotional core we find in the tales is often right there on the surface in his poems.
Absolutely. The Raven is the obvious starting point. It's just the ultimate poem of grief and obsessive sorrow. That trochaic meter gives it that falling, mournful rhythm.
Hypnotic.
Totally. The speaker's grieving for Lenore, buried in his books, and then the Raven appears, perches on the bust of Pallas Wisdom, but offers no wisdom, only that one crushing word, nevermore.
Which just echoes his own despair back at him.
Exactly. The word becomes the tangible form of his unending grief.
And the bells is a completely different kind of poetic experiment, right? All about sound.
Pure onomatopoeia, really. It's structured in 4 movements, mapping the stages of life through the sounds of different bells.
So you get
Silver sleigh bells, light, tinkling, childhood merriment. Then golden wedding bells, rich, melodic, love and stability. Then brazen alarm bells, harsh, clanging terror and crisis. And finally, the heavy, tolling, iron funeral bells, death. It's like a whole life cycle in sound.
Poe also explored ideal love, the feminine principle, in poems like To Helen.
He did. To Helen isn't about a real woman so much as the idea of beauty and inspiration. Helen's beauty restores the speaker, guides him home. She becomes Psyche, the soul, offering this nurturing light that lets him be a poet. But then you get Ulalume, which is kind of the opposite.
How so? What's the failure in Ulalume?
Ulalume is about being stuck. The speaker's wandering through this bleak, ghoul-haunted woodland on the anniversary of his lost love's death. He's emotionally numb. His intuition, symbolized by Psyche, his soul, who is with him, tries to warn him, but he ignores her.
He doesn't listen.
He doesn't listen to his inner, intuitive, maybe feminine side. And so he ends up back at the tomb of his lost love, trapped in his grief, just left to wail, unable to process it, unable to move on.
It's such a rich, complex body of work. Analysis, fantasy, deep, deep sorrow. When you boil it down, what's Poe's lasting legacy from these essential works?
Well, James Russell Lowell, who was an early critic but a sharp one, kind of nailed Poe's dual strengths. He pointed out Poe's faculty of vigorous yet minute analysis. That's your Dupin, your Goldbug logic.
Right.
And also his wonderful fecundity of imagination.
Yeah.
That's the wild Gothic horror, the fantasy, the sheer inventiveness of the early tales.
So it seems like his real genius was taking that old Gothic framework and making it terrifyingly personal, internal.
Absolutely, that's the key takeaway. Poe modernized horror by relocating the monsters. They aren't just in the creepy castle anymore, they're inside your own head. Madness, obsession, guilt, those become the ultimate sources of fear. And crucially, as the source is stress, it often happens without ghosts or goblins. The horror is psychological.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on. We've seen Poe constantly poking at the stability of identity. Think about William Wilson, The Self, literally fractured, killed by its own conscience. Or Morella, where identity seems to jump bodies to resurrect itself. Now, philosophers like John Locke talked about personal identity being tied to rational consciousness, something continuous and stable.
But Poe just throws rocks at that certainty, doesn't he? Which leads to this big question simmering under so much of his work. What did Poe think the principium individuationis really was? That core essence of you-ness? Is it something that survives death, or is it fragile? Can it be lost, fractured, even transferred? If your conscience can kill you or your identity can leap into your child, well, maybe that individual self we feel so sure about is a lot more precarious than we like to think.
Something to consider perhaps the next time you find yourself pondering forgotten lore, or hear a raisin tapping at your chamber door.
Nevermore.